This is Sunday School lesson for September the 13th, 2020. The title of this lesson is called Obedient Love. The scripture text for this lesson is Genesis 41, 25 through 33, then 37 through 40, then 50 through 52. Background read Genesis 41, 14 through 57, and 1 Peter 5, 5 through 11. Beginning with verse 14, this is the New Living Translation. Beginning with verse 14.
Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it." "It is beyond my power to do this," Joseph replied, "but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease."
Our most important opportunities may come when we least expect them. Joseph was brought hastily from the dungeon and pushed before Pharaoh. Did he have any time to prepare? Yes and no. He had no warning that he would be suddenly pulled from prison and questioned by the king. Yet Joseph was ready for almost anything because of his right relationship with God. It was not Joseph's knowledge of dreams that helped him interpret their meaning. It was his knowledge of God. Be ready for opportunities by staying close to God. Then, when he calls you to task, you'll be ready. Joseph made sure that he gave the credit to God. We should be careful to do the same. To take honor for ourselves is a form of stealing God's honor. Don't be silent when you know you should be giving glory and credit to God. Continuing with verse 17.
So Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. "In my dream," he said, "I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. But then I saw 7 sick-looking cows, scrawny and thin, come up after them. I've never seen such sorry-looking animals in all the land of Egypt. These thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows, but afterward you wouldn't have known it, for they were still as thin and scrawny as before. Then I woke up. Then I fell asleep again, and I had another dream. This time I saw 7 heads of grain, full and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted, shriveled, and withered by the east wind. And the shriveled heads swallowed the 7 healthy heads. I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they mean." Joseph responded, "Both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt. But afterward there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having 2 similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God, and he will soon make them happen. Therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt."
After interpreting Pharaoh's dream, Joseph gave the king a survival plan for the next 14 years. The only way to prevent starvation was through careful planning. Without a famine plan, Egypt would have turned from prosperity to ruin. Many find detailed planning boring and unnecessary, but planning is a responsibility, not an option. Joseph was able to save a nation by translating God's plan for Egypt into practical actions, implementation. Starting with verse 37.
Joseph made ruler of Egypt. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, "Can we find anyone else like this man so obviously filled with the Spirit of God?"
Pharaoh recognized that Joseph was a man filled with the Spirit of God. You probably won't get to interpret dreams for a king, but those who know you should be able to see God in you through your kind words, merciful acts, and wise advice. Do your relatives, neighbors, and co-workers see you as a person in whom the Spirit of God lives? Continuing with verse 39.
Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours."
Joseph rose quickly to the top, from the prison walls to Pharaoh's palace. His training for his important position involved being first a slave and then a prisoner. In each situation, he learned the importance of serving God and others. Whatever your situation, no matter how undesirable, consider it part of your training program for serving God. Continuing with verses 50 through 52.
During this time, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipherah, the priest of On. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, "God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family." Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, "God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief."
Though this is a normal relational progression, marriage, then children, this note also shows the depth of Joseph's trust in God. Joseph was preparing for the famine that he firmly believed was coming. Yet he was so confident that God had provided for these lean years that he was not hesitant about introducing new mouths to Egypt. This may foreshadow his care for the other nations and especially his estranged family. Genesis 45 verses 10 through 11. Joseph's marriage to Asenath, the daughter of a pagan priest, raises eyebrows. After all, her family was devoted to idolatry, and pagan wives had a way of introducing compromise into a husband's devotion to the Lord. Example, 1 Kings 11, 1 through 6. Yet there is no suggestion here or elsewhere that Asenath ever influenced Joseph towards idolatry. Even in marriage to the Egyptian bride, Joseph relied on the one true God only. Manasseh sounds like a Hebrew word meaning forget. God calls Joseph to forget his hard times that had characterized his life for the previous 13 years. With that recorded in 41:46. In relation to his father's house, this probably means that Joseph no longer held any grudges or ill will towards his brothers, since he could begin to see those circumstances in a new light. See chapter 45, verses 4 through 8. At the same time, it is clear that Joseph had not forgotten God, nor had God forgotten him. Though the name of his firstborn emphasizes forgetting, the name also reminded Joseph of what had been forgotten and ensured that it was not really lost to his memory. Ephraim sounds like a Hebrew word meaning twice fruitful. It probably reflects on the fact that God had given Joseph 2 sons. The name likely praised God for the blessing that Joseph was experiencing in Egypt. Furthermore, the name may have celebrated the abundance of a land about to be hit by famine. This suggests once again that Joseph confidently trusted in God's provision during lean times. Just as God has brought Joseph through affliction before, Joseph came to anticipate that God would bring him, his family, and all of Egypt through a great famine. The name Ephraim also means foreshadow the story of Jacob's family in Egypt for generations to come. God would not forget Jacob, Israel, just as God had not forgotten Joseph. Although this is background scripture, let's start with 53 through 57.
At last, the 7 years of bumper crops throughout the land of Egypt came to an end. Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries, but throughout Egypt there was plenty of food. Eventually, however, the famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well, and when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you." So with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. And people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world.
Famine was a catastrophe because ancient peoples rely almost exclusively on their own crops for food. Almost perfect conditions were needed to produce good crops because there was no chemical fertilizers or pesticides. Any variances in rainfall or insect activity could cause crop failure and great hunger. Lack of storage, refrigeration, or transportation turned a moderate famine into a desperate situation. The famine Joseph prepared for was especially severe because 7 years of famine came 1 year right after the other. Without God's intervention, the Egyptian nation would have crumbled. Joseph himself was given a new Egyptian name, and by implication, an Egyptian identity. But he gave both of his sons Hebrew names, Genesis 41, 51 through 52. Doing so acknowledged the presence and provision of God of his family in his life. It also emphasized that Joseph still thought about the family of his youth, apparently fondly enough to choose names in his native tongue. Joseph's afflictions are a vital part of his story of triumph. The God whom Joseph served and honored is the God we serve and honor today. No matter the circumstance, he does not change. He remains in control. Whether we find ourselves in a pit or in a palace, he is there. Joseph demonstrated radical faith in his God. Even though God might have seemed far away during the 13 years of slavery, God continued to give Joseph evidence that he had not forgotten the imprisoned man. How does your life witness to the same truth? Don't forget to comment, share, rate, and subscribe. This concludes the Sunday School lesson for September 13th, 2020. Have a good day.